This morning, we're going to be talking about something that really affects everyone in the state of Michigan, and that is the state of our roads. Our session this morning is called Michigan's Road Fix, the $1.5 billion question. Are we getting close to a solution? What does that solution really look like? What do people want to really see happen here? And what is it going to cost? We're going to talk about all of that. But first, to give us a little bit of perspective and take a look at some of the numbers, is Doug Rothwell. He is the CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan, and I'd like to bring him out right now. Doug.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Christy, for that great introduction. And the first thing I want to do, though, is I think we ought to give a round of applause to Sandy and Tammy and Mark Davidoff. What a great conference they put on again this year. Although, Sandy, I will tell you that I wondered if maybe there was something that I did to make my chamber friends mad with me, to have you put me up here to talk about roads today after all that we've been through. I wondered, did I eat too many shrimp at the reception, or, did I get my credentials wrong or whatever? But the fact is that we've been talking about this issue far too long. And we hope, though, that maybe some of the information I can share with you today from Business Leaders for Michigan, at least, will help provide a roadmap, if you kind of pardon the pun, for where we need to go from here. So the first thing I want to do is to share some polling information with you that we captured. We did a 600 sample survey of the voters the week after Proposal 1 failed. And here's basically what we found. So no big surprise. You'd probably wonder why we paid money for a poll to say this, which is that it was just too complicated. And frankly, it was a feeling that was shared not just by people that voted on the proposal, but also those that didn't vote on the proposal. Over half said that they opposed the measure because it just wasn't about fixing the roads. It was about spending money on a lot of other things that didn't have anything to do with the roads. And the second most frequently cited reason was because voters didn't trust Lansing, and maybe partly because it was such a complex proposal. Now, the one thing we did find is that voters didn't have to be convinced that the roads are bad. In fact, 8 in 10 believe that the roads here in Michigan are worse than other states. I was a little surprised that there was actually 1 of 10 people that thought that our roads were better than other states. I wondered, is it our peninsulas or something that people don't get out across the state borders enough? I don't know, but there were some that felt that way. We also found that while many think at least part of the problem can be addressed by cutting the budget, there's no consensus on where to make those cuts. In fact, the most popular option was about 30% for cutting prison spending as a way to do that. Now, the other thing is that we did test just about every idea that's being considered in Lansing right now as to how to fix the roads, but there were only really 2 options that came up very high on the list that they would support. And what I think is important is these 2 options, both of them require tax increases. So the first top getter was the 1 cent increase to the sales tax, just a straight sales tax increase, and all that money would have to go to the roads. The second most popular option was converting the flat gas tax that we have today to a wholesale tax and then index that for inflation. Now, of course, the first option requires a ballot measure. The second option does not. No other option really got close to 50% support. The other thing the poll said is that the voters want the problem fixed now. They want the governor and the legislature to solve the problem quickly. They want the roads fixed. They think the issue is urgent. Think immediate action is necessary. So the message that I think is kind of a takeaway from the voters from this poll is that the people want the roads fixed as soon as possible. They want the fix to be relatively simple without involving other issues. It's okay to increase taxes as part of the solution. And some cuts might be okay, but I don't think that they want those cuts to be very deep. So based on that feedback, Business Leaders for Michigan, and of course we represent the largest employers in the state, developed a set of principles that we hope will guide a solution to this problem. And our principles are basically this. The solution's got to be big enough to actually solve the problem. It has to require warranties and guarantees. The funding source should be dedicated and sustainable so that we're not here talking about this issue a couple of years from now. The revenue should come from the users of the system, which means all of us. And the solution shouldn't adversely impact other critical priorities that involve creating jobs. In other words, we shouldn't be solving this problem by creating another one in another part of the budget. Now, I can't speak for all the state business organizations, but I do believe that these principles align pretty well with most of their viewpoints because I've spoken with most of them in the last few weeks. And I will say that these principles also align very well with what the voters are saying in our polling results. So from a Business Leaders for Michigan standpoint, we believe that the solution is going to mostly depend on additional revenues. Now, like the voters, we do think that there could be some well-reasoned budget cuts that could be part of the solution, but we just don't think they're going to be able to be very deep to meet the principles that the voters want to see resolved. So let's get this problem fixed. The sooner the better is kind of our takeaway. The good news seems to be that there is a path forward that can be taken to solve this and would also be one that the voters support. Thanks very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage the MiWeek anchor for Detroit Public Television, Christy McDonald. Joining Christy McDonald on stage, please welcome the Vice President of Business Unit Finance and Rates for ITC Holdings Corporation, Gregory Ioanidis. The President of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, Joseph Lehman. The President of the Citizens Research Council of Michigan, Eric Lupher. Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Edward C. Levy Company, S. Evan Weiner. And the Mayor of the City of Westland, William Wild.
Well, gentlemen, welcome. Before we came out here on stage, Sandy Brua said, well, you have 38 minutes to solve this road crisis. So, and actually 37 now as it's counting down. So let's get to it. Gregory, I want to start with you and just give us a little bit of a business perspective of the impact of the state of the bad roads we have here in Michigan on business.
It's a significant impact. And you know, for us, ITC, we're an infrastructure company. So when you look at things like roads, sewers, water systems, rail, these are just vital to the economy. They really are the economic engine. It's what drives the economy. It helps attract businesses. So we really have to take care of our infrastructure, and it's across the board.
Mayor Wild, I know that you, I'm sure, had the phones ring off the hook in Westland about the state of roads. And how does it really impact a city like yours when the roads are in the condition they are in?
You know, it makes it tough on a lot of different things. First of all, on the economic development level, it's tough. We're trying to attract businesses to our community, but we're also trying to attract home buyers to our community as well. So roads play a major impact, and I can tell you as mayors, we were on ground floor as Proposition 1 imploded. So I think the mayors have a unique perspective that we can bring to the table for Plan B.
Evan, you do a lot of work on the roads, so how bad are they really? but really, I mean, give us an idea condition-wise of just how bad are they?
Well, I've had the great pleasure of living in Michigan for 34 years, but we do business in other states and we do business in 5 continents. And I have to tell you, we have the worst roads of any state, and frankly, if you travel around the world, we're probably have the poorest conditions of any place I've ever traveled, except for India, where we have a business. And so it's about as bad as you can get. There isn't a state around ours in the Rust Belt that has the conditions that we have. So it's very poor and it's unsafe.
So Eric, I guess I'm going to ask you the next question of, so why has it taken us so long? If we can all agree about the state of our roads in Michigan, why has it taken us so long to get to this point?
We've fallen into a trap. We put our road funding on autopilot. Our Constitution says that gas tax and vehicle registration fees have to be used for road funding. So the legislature, not just this legislature, but years and years of legislatures, has taken that money and it's just been a pass-through. Here it comes and here it goes. And the problem is that the Constitution says that, but the Constitution doesn't say that only those money can go for roads. So I think an important step is defining the problem the right way, that we don't have a revenue problem, we have an appropriation problem. If we do have the worst roads, then we have to define what it takes to address those needs, and whether the money comes through dedicated revenue sources or supplemental appropriations, we have to fund those needs as we do for education and higher ed and community health and everything else. We're trying to identify what those needs are and appropriate enough money to meet those needs.
So Joe, if we've talked about this for years, is this finally the time? Is the urgency finally there?
Well, sure, the urgency is here. We were talking backstage, and we said we're probably in a better position than we realized, because people agree that the roads need to be fixed, and there's even pretty broad agreement on the magnitude of the fix, 1.2 billion and maybe higher. So that's good. And people recognize, I think, that roads are a core function of government, at least as long as government is in the road business. Even Adam Smith, the famed inventor of the invisible hand of the market, he had no problem with government infrastructure, which is something I remind our free market friends. So the least that government can do is take care of its core functions in a very dependable way. And Eric hit it on the head. It's probably an appropriations problem as much as anything.
All right, so what did we learn, Mayor Wild? I'm going to ask you, what did we learn from the defeat of Prop 1?
Well, a lot of people, they focus that this was an issue that was very complicated. I think one of the things that we found out at the local level was that the voters can handle a complicated ballot question. They work their way through the personal property tax ballot question. I think what this came down to is more of a protest vote. I think the voters were a little upset that it took the state legislature this long to work on a plan. The one thing I think that I was a little surprised about was our residents were willing. They're willing to pay. They realize that there's a problem. They're willing to pay for it. And I think the thing that they talked the most about was, what are these roads going to look like? What's the craftsmanship going to be? Are we going to have warranties on them? So when I hear residents start talking like that, it sounds to me like they're ready to buy.
All right, so Evan, I want you to pick up, because you're nodding frantically when you're talking about conditions and you're talking about warranties.
The mayor's right. And look, here we are, we're a panel. We all agree that we've got to do something.
Right.
Right? We've got to do something. So in 2008, there was called a TF2 report. And this was a compilation of all the engineering work that was done to determine what the conditions of the roads are, and what it would cost to repair the roads and keep them in fair, good, or great condition. $1.2 billion was the number just to get back to fair to good. So there's science behind this number. We have to make sure that we pick the right number. And if we pick the wrong number, it'll be a mistake. We owe it to our residents that are using your constituents. We owe it to the public to make sure that we do the fix correctly. So there's science behind the number. The real question is, how do we pay for it? And it's a tough challenge. New revenue is needed. I think Doug did a good job of explaining that. And we just have to get over the fact that we're going to need new revenue to fix the problem. 1.2 billion is a 2008 number. It's now more.
That's true. And
so you have to do the math. And for those that haven't had the opportunity to really read it or discuss it, 1 penny in sales tax is $45 million. So do the math. This is not a nickel issue. It's 25 cents. That's where we need to get to. But if you look, and we had a chance to talk about this a little bit, if you look at the states around us, that's the kind of increase that we're seeing, even more in Pennsylvania, for example. But I think that, I think it was Greg or maybe Eric that mentioned it. As you know, at the pump, for simple math, half the tax goes to other things than roads. And trying to deal with that is going to be a bit of a struggle.
All right, so now we're getting down to a little bit of the money and where we can find the money. So let me ask you this, Eric. Do we have that money already built in, that $1.5 billion somewhere that we can just carve out of the budget that we already have without any kind of tax?
No, we don't. State spending right now is about 3/4 of what it was in the year 2000, prior to 9/11, prior to the Great Recession. Spending, revenues coming into the state are down significantly from where they were. And we see that in the budget, that appropriations to higher education are below what they were significantly. Every extra dollar that we're getting in for education is going solely for legacy cost. We're not increasing the money going into the classroom. Money going to state revenue sharing is about, for statutory state revenue sharing, is about 1/4 of what the legislature, what the statute says it should be. There's a lot of strain on the budget right now as it is, and it's going to increase because we have that personal property tax reform that needs to be carried out, and we have the Medicaid pressures, the Affordable Care Act, and how that's going to play out. There's a lot of strain on the budget right now. There's not $1.5 billion just lying around that we can grab onto and say, there we go, we fixed our problem.
Joe, would you agree with that?
No, not really. We have compiled at the Mackinac Center a list of more than $2 billion in things that, in the state spending, that deserve scrutiny, that are possibly lower priority than the roads. And we have agreed this is an urgent problem, but so when you have an urgent problem, what comes to mind is priorities. Well, your urgent things need to be top priority. So every time we say that we need to raise a tax to fund the roads, it's really a bald admission that the roads aren't the highest priority, like we've been saying for a long time. Now, in the end, a compromise may require some kind of a tax increase to go along with some well-reasoned cuts. Those well-reasoned cuts could start with really the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which has, it's a program that consumes hundreds of millions of dollars every year. The actual job production results almost never come close to the claims, and the program's cloaked in secrecy, and the benefits are concentrated on a few. None of these things are true with the roads. Everybody benefits from roads, and the roads aren't cloaked in secrecy.
I think you bring up the interesting point of well-reasoned cuts, and everybody has a definition of what well-reasoned would be. The governor would probably not agree with you in terms of taking money away from the MEDC. Gregory, let me ask you, if you do start to take money away from certain programs like that that are encouraging or meant to encourage business, what does that say in terms of, as a member of the business community, how do you react to that?
Well, the expression that comes to mind for me is robbing Peter to pay Paul. You absolutely need to look inside your coffers and make sure that you're running a really strong financial house, and that you're putting the money to the priorities that need it. But you look at this issue, and there seems to be absolute agreement on we need to do something. There seems to be agreement on the amount that's required to actually bring these to fair and good and hopefully better. For me, when I look at this, there's a number of principles that help guide me as to what the solution is, and I draw upon the industry we're in, and this is the proverbial, what we call in our industry, the cost allocation question. Where does the money come from to do this? And I subscribe to the KISS principle. Keep it simple. You've got to keep it simple. It's got to be transparent. And then we have to make sure that the cost allocation of this is in a manner that reflects the beneficiaries and those that are actually causing the cost. There has to be a rational allocation. We see it in our industry all the time. And once you get through those things, then you have to make sure that the money that you get, you're actually directing it and spending it on the roads. And maybe you need to have some benchmarking, some metrics around that, and reports that actually show at the end of the day, here's what we raised, here's what we spent, here's where we spent it on.
Joe, let me come back to you because Doug Rothwell had up some numbers that said that people would say, you know what, we would be interested in a tax. We would be able to pay more. Are you ruling that out entirely?
No, not at all. It's just that people who really believe in prioritizing the funds that we have, and let me just say, that's the Mackinac Center. We'll be cheering in direct proportion to the amount of a road funding package that comes from current low priority spending. it isn't fair to go to the taxpayers to ask for more when we still got some really questionable spending that just goes on year after year. And the MEDC's claim that there are other, it isn't all about MEDC, but when the claim is we have to protect MEDC because of job creation, the numbers are incredibly small. It's a fraction of the monthly job churn. Those are even the numbers they claim, not the actual numbers. And every time we have to increase taxes, it makes every job worth less.
Mayor Wild, let me ask you, what are people telling you in terms of what their threshold for pain is in terms of paying something or paying a tax, a higher tax?
You know, like I said, what I was saying was that the people, I think they're to the realization that they're going to have to pay more for the roads. And you know, I'd like to cycle back to what Joe had said. You know, like Joe, I'm a results-oriented person, but we got into this position where we're at with roads because it wasn't a priority, and now we're trying to play catch-up. My biggest fear is if we move away from the MEDC, especially at the time that the state's starting to become competitive again, that we're going to fall behind there as well. So I think it's a balancing solution, but
there is you know, we talk about taxes, but in this case, what we're talking about is a user fee. And I think it's important in terms of what the public appreciates is that this isn't a broad-based tax. Most people drive, most people pay for fuel, but it's a user fee. It's a good principle, it's a conservative principle. And we're talking about making an investment in the roads. And so it's not wasteful. We're going to invest in the roads. And the folks that use it, truckers, business, people that are in the cars, they're going to pay for it. Yeah. So it's not a tax, it's a user fee. And we need to make sure that in their dialogue that we describe it that way.
Eric, let me ask you, from some of the plans that have already emerged right now about what could happen that the House has brought out and also the Senate now this week, or reports of anyway, what have you, in you taking a look at it, what have you thought of those?
Well, I think this isn't you know, reinventing the wheel. We're looking at proposals that have been out before. Most of them are user fee driven ideas that to have those that use the system pay for the system. So, you know, we're throwing out a lot more trial balloons. Some of it we saw in the days leading up to what became Proposal 1. So I think they're all realistic. The point I want to make, though, even though we might come up with a $1.5 billion fix, whether that's through some reappropriation, $1.5 billion of new user fee revenues, let's not fall into the trap that that's going to fix our system going forward, that we have to keep an eye on the needs of the system, and if it doesn't come up with enough money on an ongoing basis, we can't be too shy to say we need to appropriate more to get there. I can almost guarantee if we fall into that trap, we'll be right back here 10 years from now having this same panel talking about the same things again. That we have to keep an eye on what those needs are. 1.5 might be the fix today, but there's no reason to think that the money coming in on a year-to-year basis is going to reflect the system needs on a year-to-year basis.
Because Evan, I mean, you have to look in terms of long-term planning and in terms of building the roads and building quality roads, and you have to make sure that you have enough revenue coming down the road also.
$1.5 billion repairs what we currently have. It's not new capacity, which is what you're talking about. And so people have to understand that. It's about getting our roads and bridges repaired to the point where they're safe and they're smooth and appropriate, but it's not adding capacity. And we're going to need capacity because we're growing as a state. And I have to say that we're so fortunate to have a governor who's not afraid to go and speak the truth and to tell us what we need. He's done the math. He's a numbers guy. And so he said $1.2 billion in 2008. Now it's $1.5 billion today. But it's not about adding capacity. If we're going to grow, we are going to need more. You're absolutely right.
Mayor Wild, did you want to add to that?
You know, just going back to what Evan said just a little bit ago about the user fee. You know, one thing I think that the users are going to want to see is these dollars trickle back to the roads that they actually use. You know, we talk a lot about the freeways and the bridges, but the people that are actually going to be paying this tax, they want to see the roads, they want to see that money trickle down. Maybe this is just my mayor's hat on, but they want to see that money trickle back to Main Street and trickle back to the roads that they actually use every day as well.
Eric, you wanted to say something?
Well, yeah, I mean, part of what we have to look at too is what happens to the money after it comes in. Right now the money goes and it's distributed based on what's called Act 51 of 1951. The 51st Act adopted that year. And we haven't paid attention to that. Prior proposals, if you go back since 1997, there's been many proposals to increase funding for roads, and many of those have fallen apart, not because they couldn't agree on how much money, but what to do with the money once it comes in. How the money is distributed among the counties, how the money is distributed among the cities and villages, how it's spent, what are our priorities for bridges and for the state system. And that's part of the feedback I got when we were out talking about Proposal 1. The people said, the way we're doing it now isn't working. Why would we give you more money to do the same thing? And so I don't want to get caught only in this is a revenue problem, because we have to look at what happens to the money after it comes in and use that money to the most efficient use.
Bit of a trust problem as well. Joe?
Yeah. And that has to be done to preserve the user fee principle. And I just want to affirm the support for the user fee principle, because it really is the best way. And we are so close. We're maybe 10 years or so from being able to remove a lot of friction from user fee technology-wise. There's a little bit of an issue now with hybrids because they don't use as much fuel. And pretty soon, it's going to be technologically feasible to pay by the mile, pay by the ton, pay by whatever makes sense to keep the roads in condition. These issues will have to be argued through public policy-wise, but we shouldn't create a system now that makes that harder when we're talking about it again in 10 years.
Gregory?
Yeah, one of the things I want to make sure we get out there is the perspective and the horizon of this. This is long-term. These are long-lived assets. If you actually maintain them properly, invest in the infrastructure, they're long-lived assets. So we have to remember that the scope by which we look at this is over a several number of years. And in many cases, it's several election cycles away too. So we have to make investments and choices now, and the benefits that are going to come from this aren't going to be tomorrow, aren't going to be next year. They're going to be years from now, and they're going to be sustainable over that time frame as long as we keep this sustainable.
Yeah, Evan, I want to address the perception that some people have that when we even redo our roads, they're not lasting long enough. And how come it feels like there's crews around, we just did this stretch of road a year ago. How come I'm seeing orange barrels out there again? Do we have proper warranties in the state of Michigan? Are we on par with the rest of the Midwest in terms of the bar that we have for our roads?
I'd probably be smarter just to agree with you, move on. But look, the state of Michigan has a warranty system. And as much as people have a perception that it's not working, the fact is we have more warranties than any other state in the union. We have a good warranty system. And, but the relationship between the warranties and the condition of the roads, there's two separate, really, topics. The fact is that, it's like in your house. You have a roof that's leaking. What we're doing is we're fixing half the roof. Mm-hmm. We're not fixing the whole thing, so it continues to leak. So if you only have enough money to do a repair, a Band-Aid, a patch, it's not going to last. And in many cases, unfortunately for our traveling public, that's what we get. A road it's just a simple engineering issue, but you've got to fix the base. You've got to fix the drainage. You have to fix what's underneath what we drive on. We're not doing that. We only have enough money to repair and patch. And so it doesn't last. And that's a function of the fact that we're underfunded. And so the problem is growing exponentially. And if you don't have enough money to repair the roof and it starts to leak and you start to patch it, you'll never catch up. And this is the issue. So yes, we have good warranties. Actually, we have a great asset management program. Department of Transportation is really well advanced in terms of what the rest of the nation is doing. We know what our assets are. We know what we're spending on it. We know what we need. So Unfortunately, we haven't had enough money to repair things correctly. And the warranties stick. I can tell you, in being in the part of our business is of course, building roads. In other states, it's much tougher here to build it right, and they hold your feet to the fire. If there's a problem, you've got to go out and fix it. It's a good system. It's the right system. It's the way it should be.
Eric, you're...
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, but as we've looked at this issue, it really begs that we shouldn't be the bottom of the stack and bottom of the states in how much we're spending on roads. We should be the top of the roads. Our geography, being surrounded by lakes, really with the soil, as I understand it, is not very conducive for building roads. Detroit and most of Michigan is very susceptible to the freeze-thaw cycle, so the roads are expanding and contracting, and so the base becomes even more important. We know we're a manufacturing state. We've grown and been born on being a manufacturing state, and that means we're going to have trucks on our roads, and trucks do a lot of damage to the roads. All those things lend themselves that we need to do it right. We need to build the top quality roads, not be patching these roads and nickel and diming it the whole way through. We got to do it right, and we got to build a quality system. We need the Cadillac of roads, not the cheap kind of roads, and that's going to get us further. We have to look at our conditions. Why is it important, and meet those needs.
Joe, could you want to add?
Yeah, and everything being said here sort of emphasizes for me that the state may not have any asset more central to economic development than its roads. And that alone is an argument for thinking anew about how we think about economic development. It's a discussion that is a reason that I was glad to be invited on the panel, because I don't know if anyone else would have raised the issue. There's so much of our funding put into a program with dubious results that we can't just pass over it as an option for doing something that is so vitally important.
Go ahead, Gregory.
If I could just add, the other thing we need to think about, Michigan isn't totally unique in its geography and the climate and things that affect us. I'm actually Canadian and a commuter, and so when I look at my side of the river and the quality of roads we have there, very different, very different. And every time I cross the Ambassador Bridge, it's like I'm entering another country. And well, I am, but well, what do you know?
Breaking news.
But
Breaking
the
news.
thing that's really
Hang
important
on.
about that is the fact that we're highly interconnected to Ontario and the two economies. And when you think about the commerce that flows across that international border, you want to make sure you have good roads and good infrastructure to get those goods and services to where they need to go.
All right, so we're in agreement on a lot of things here. Mayor Weil, let me ask you then, what are the conversations that you're having to insert yourself now into this process that we're hopefully going to be going through here in the next couple of weeks in the summertime to see what can happen in Lansing?
What I've been talking to people about is as we cycle back, and you can see that we're agreeing on a lot of these things, is that whatever we're going to decide to do, I thought mayors should have a seat at the table. I thought back to last year's conference here, and Mayor Landrieu was here from New Orleans, and one of the things that he talked about on the visit that he made to Detroit was that one of the things that he noticed was that the things that worked were the things that there was inclusion on. It was the things that the federal government, the state government, and the local government worked together on. And the things that didn't work were the things that people were trying to do in silos. So what I think is, as we work towards a solution, is that the mayor should be at the table. We're the closest to the people. I think that we can help on messaging. I think that we can talk about, the road solutions and how long a road is actually going to last. It's going to depend on what we do with it. So I think mayors bring a perspective to the table that you don't get from polling and you don't get from focus groups.
All right, so Eric, let me ask you this. Are you confident that this is going to be a legislative fix, that this is nothing that's going to go back to the voters?
Yeah, the only reason we had to go to the voters this time is because we've put so much legislative material into the Constitution in order to change the sales tax rate, in order to change how the money is make sure that the schools and local governments weren't adversely impacted by ending the taxation of motor fuels, was to do it through a constitutional amendment. If we'd stop putting all that stuff into the Constitution, we wouldn't have to burden the people with a referendum every time we wanted to do this. So if the goal is not to make sure that all the money from the taxation of motor fuel is going to roads, if we can simply focus on coming up with the necessary amounts, then we're not going to have to go back to the people. One of the things that Doug talked about was maybe a sales tax increase. That's going to require a vote of the people because it's in the Constitution. If we're sticking to a user fee-based system, sales or motor fuel taxes, vehicle registration fees, some of the new methods of taxing people according to their use of the system, we can do that legislatively, and there isn't a need to go to the people for that.
All right, let's talk a little bit of timeline. Evan, what would you like to see happen here for the state? How quickly do you think something should be done? Are we talking the next year, or how soon do you believe something should be done?
Well, we're already behind. So as we discuss this, the roads are failing. And so time is essential. If you can repair something before it's really broken, it's a lot more cost effective. And so reconstructing a road, going down to the base, et cetera, it's very, very expensive. If you can repair it now, it's just more cost effective. So we need a legislative solution, and we need it now. And so I think that we have to support our legislatures. They know that they have to do something, and we have to give them the support that they need. And I think that there's a push to get something done before summer recess, and I think that's good. We should get it done now. We should get it done now because in the funding, whatever the solution is, whether it's a gas tax, registration fee, a combination, those monies have to start to flow. It takes time. And we have to start doing the repair work. We just have to do the engineering. We have to get geared up to do the work. And we need to start basically this fall. If we get a legislative solution today, in the next month, the work isn't going to really start until the fall. And it's time. So it's now. It's not next year. We've got to do it now.
Joe, do you think that we can get that fixed within this 2-month period?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with Evan and perhaps everybody here that the time is now. The only thing that would be better would have been taken care of in 2008. And there can be a real political opportunity for leaders in the legislature. Not just the opportunity to do the right thing, which I know is on their mind, but there's political opportunity. The results of Proposal 1 are so fresh in voters' minds that is going to sting the proponents of Proposal 1 for a long time, but that can be blunted if the legislature and governor can act quickly right now. The voters will say, yeah, they really fumbled on Proposal 1, but they got something that was reasonable done in a quick amount of time. That proves that they weren't trying to mislead us about the urgency question. They believe it's urgent. So I agree that the time is now, and before summer recess, so much the better.
Eric, I'm just jumping on a little bit what Joe says. Do you think there's a little bit of a trust issue here with the public, that they're kind of sitting back with their arms folded and saying, come on, you guys have to do something about this?
I think that's why we got into this mess in the first place, is that somehow in Michigan we've bred a real contempt, a real lack of trust in our elected officials, and it's hard to blame it on the legislature or the state because we see what goes on in Washington. We have things go on at the local government level. It's government at all levels. Things don't go the way that people hope for, and that erodes the trust. That's why we've put things into the Constitution. That's why we've developed term limits. That's why we've done a number of things. And it's really, as kind of a political scientist, to look at that and say, what is it about Michigan that our distrust in government is worse than other states? That's why I do what I do, keeping an eye on government, keeping an eye on everything that goes on, kind of as a healthy distrust in government. We've built a Bill of Rights based on a distrust of government, but we've taken it so far that we've almost made the operations of government dysfunctional, that they can't do things like increasing the sales tax without a vote of the people, that they can't, if we have a good legislator, they can't stick around for more than 6 years. And all this comes back to bite us, I think, in the long term. And so we have to get over that. We have to rebuild the trust in government to do the things we ask them to do. Having said that, I have no idea how to do it. How do you rebuild the trust in government?
I think it's a fascinating conversation. As the only elected official on the panel, Mayor Wild, I'm going to go down to you and for you to comment on what Eric just said.
Well, the trust in government, there was a recent Zogby poll that showed that while trust in government nationwide is trending downward, that the residents are voting, or they're showing that they trust their local government and their mayors more so than they do state legislatures, governors, all the way up to the president. So, I think that there's a great opportunity here, kind of, like Joe had said, it's fresh in their mind right now. When you think back to those statistics that Doug started off with, I think the second highest statistic people voted no on Prop 1 was because of the lack of trust in the state government. So I think this is a great opportunity for them to show some leadership, to work together in a bipartisan solution here and get this thing done quick. I mean, they've got that window of opportunity. I'd love to see them run through it.
Evan?
I think you're right. Two things. One, the engineering, a lot of it has been done. So whether you're talking about state roads, county roads, or city or township roads, you can actually tell the people, based on the income that would come from a user fee, what roads in your town in Westland would be repaired now. So the people really can get the message. Here are the roads that are going to be fixed first, second, third, fourth. That's there. The information's there. So I think that the mayors are really critical and important. That's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. But you can tell them. But actually, if we really sit back and think about this, if you're as old as I am and you've been around for a while, I think government's working better in the state of Michigan than it's worked in a long, long time. Let's give our leadership, let's give the governor, let's give the legislators some credit. A lot of good things have happened. And roads and the fix for roads is another good thing that's going to happen. And so while it appears that the trust isn't there, actually, for those of us that have been studying public trust for a long time, there's a lot of good that's been done. And I think that the system is working. And we have great leaders. We've got a great governor. We've got great mayors. We are really in good shape. And the improvements are here. You've got conservatives. You've got liberals that are agreeing on an awful lot of things that are going on in the state that are improving. So I think that the trust actually has improved. That's my perspective. And I think fixing the roads, I think we'll have the courage. I think we'll have the legislative courage to fix it and do the right thing.
And Joe, as we wrap up here, would you say, looking back over the last 10 years or so, this is one of the biggest issues that Michigan is going to have to face here in fixing the roads?
Well, that's right, and it ties directly to the trust issue. It's fair for people to ask, if the government can't be trusted to do a good job with something as basic as roads, then why should I trust it with all of the other things that it has involved itself in? This is why government has grown. And the trust issue, the skepticism of government is often well-deserved because there are very few government programs, if you will, that turn in better results than just good basic functioning roads. And we're under-prioritizing those. So the government ought to prioritize the stuff that works, which is roads.
All right, Gregory, I'm going to give you the last final thought.
The time is now. We have to act now. There's no doubt about that. And as it relates to trust and the skepticism that may exist, let's put the proof in the pudding. Let's get the revenues in, and let's do what we say we're going to do with them and invest them in the roads.
Bottom line, I think that we're all going to be very anxious to see what's going to happen, transpire here over the next 2 months or so in Lansing. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I think we've gone a little closer to some solutions, and thank you very much for your time.